L'chaim, Chaim, say L'chaim.
L'chaim.
The first meeting took time to stop pulling teeth. I mean, it was like pulling teeth. You were just dormant sometimes. Anyway, L'chaim, L'chaim. And Hashem should bless us, bless each one of you, each one of us, the Teich Klal Yisrael amongst all Eden, that we should be encouraged to take every chance we have. Second chance, third chance, a 10th chance, never give up. We should take that chance, and the Rebbe should give us Hatzlacha. Just like the Eden in Midbar, they complained, and Hashem gave a new mitzvah in the Torah because they were sincerely asking for a chance. Give us a chance. A second chance tells us one very simple thing. That even if you couldn't make it in the first chance because you weren't up to it and you missed the opportunity, you lost it. And when you lost it, it's a serious loss, because what happened that the whole Jewish nation participated in a certain activity, in a certain code. The whole Jewish nation individually participated in a code. And these few people dropped out. They were not included, which is extremely painful. It says, we are dropped out. We lost our connection. We lost our inclusion. And how is it that we have another chance? You have another chance because this loss of inclusion is only superficial. In reality, in the real truth, everybody is included. Everybody is included. Every Yid is automatically included, whether he knows it or not. And even a Geir is included. Because as the Rebbe always explains, this famous saying, because the Gemara says, Geir shenizdayeh, a Geir who became a Geir, but the Geir who converted. So the question is, before he converted, he was not a Geir. He became a Geir upon conversion. Why do you call him a Geir who converted? The Rebbe points out that in other such situations, say for instance, an Eved, you know that in the Torah there's such a concept as an Eved, a slave. And a slave has certain being. He is a step below the full Yid, that certain mitzvahs he is obligated and mitzvahs he is not obligated. So whenever there's a reference that a slave became a full-fledged Yid, the expression is Eved shenishtachna, an Eved who became free. That means that you recognize that first he was an Eved, and then he became free. By Geir, the expression is Geir shenishtachna. Geir shenishtachna means that It seems to be implying that even before he was a Ger, he was already a Ger. Before he recognized it, before he converted these two as a Ger. So the explanation is, it says that Emerson, even the Neshamas of Gerim are also present on scene. Except they had to go through this process and then ultimately recognize it and come through. So the reason that we have a second chance and a third chance is that really this missing of the chance and being excluded is only external. Like we spoke long time ago, but the Rambam explains that every Yid, even if he declares to the opposite, he says, I don't want to do this mitzvah. But in effect, in truth, he too wants to do everything that will include him in the Jewish people. No Yid is deep down consents, wants to be broken away from the Jewish people. Superficially, it appears to him he gets stubborn, he may some kind of stupidity fell into his mind, but that's not the real self. That's not his real self. That's why we have Pessach Sheiny. It attests to this truth, that there's no such thing as a Yid really, willingly wants to be broken away and separated from the Jewish people. Such a thing doesn't exist. So therefore, say L'chaim and Pessach Sheiny, and all of us here are in their second chance, third chance, fourth chance. So ultimately, we will hop onto the wagon, and we'll settle in and become comfortable, and we'll be part of the entourage. We'll be counted in, not counted out, chas v'sholem, not even being counted as some observers who will say, oh, it's an interesting phenomenon over there. Oh, it's interesting. What's it all about? Oh, it's a curiosity. It's interesting. Well, maybe I should think about it. And then he continues to think about it and think about it and think about it. And something is kind of gluing him to his place and he can't jump in. So we have to know that ultimately we all have to jump in. Jump in means that we stop making our own calculations, making our own superficial kind of arguments and provisions. There is one Torah for all the Jewish people. There's one Rebbe, there's one Chassidus, there's one truth, and we all are privy to it. It all belongs to all of us, and we all belong to it. And that's what Pessach Sheiny is. So let's all say L'chaim together, and all commit ourselves to the principles of Pessach Sheiny. We're not going to miss the chances that Hashem gives us. L'chaim, L'chaim.
L'chaim. Third and fourth and fifth vodka also.
I'm sorry?
Third and fourth and fifth vodka also. Every chance.
Okay, let's go. Everyone together. Allah, kama v'kama, taiva kula, umchupel, kamotem, aleinu. I'm not sure if you all know the original episode of the Pessach Sheiny, so I'll briefly describe it to you. This was in the Midbar, in the desert. When Eden came out of Mitzrayim. And when Pesach came around, and the next year after they came out of Mitzrayim, the time of Pesach came around, Hashem told Moshe that he should make the Eden bring the Korban Pesach. Korban Pesach, can't discuss the whole Indian, but Korban Pesach is that Korban, that sacrifice that Eden performed just prior to leaving Mitzrayim. The first Korban Pesach was done in Mitzrayim itself. And this became a mitzvah for all generations, that every year, on the 14th of Nisan, the day before the Yom Tov, the holiday of Pesach, you have to bring a Korban Pesach. Korban Pesach has certain restrictions. That in order to bring a Korban Pesach, you have to yimal, get into various things, and one last thing is that you have to be tohir. You cannot be impure. Any korban you're not allowed to bring when you're impure. Impure means impurity has all kinds of different possibilities, different sources. And generally speaking, if a person is impure, unless he is sick, then he dips himself in kosher and mikveh. By evening time, he becomes toher again, with some exceptions. But there is a certain type of impurity when you touch a dead body, that this lasts for 7 days. And therefore, these people in the Midbar, there were several people in the Midbar who handled a certain body, and they were doing a tremendous mitzvah by handling this body. There are different opinions. One says that because they were carrying the orange of Yosef HaTzadik. His bones were transported in the desert throughout the journey, from Mitzrayim and buried in Eretz Yisrael. So therefore they were Tomit. They couldn't bring the Korban Pesach in time. And some say there was a different opinion because of the death of Neyarim. Whatever it is, they were impure. They were impure not because they did a negative thing, but rather because they did a positive thing. But nevertheless, they couldn't bring the Korban Pesach. So when they saw that all Eden joined in to bring a Korban Pesach, and they couldn't, they recognized what they're missing, and they went to Moshe and they said, how can it be that we should be singled out and we should miss out on this opportunity? And Moshe asked Hashem, and Hashem said to him, they will have another chance. Next month, on the 14th day of the next month, which is the month of Iyar, they should bring a Korban Pesach. That will be an exception. Now, we ought to pay attention to what happened over here, and try to draw some lesson for us. Try to find where there is a parallel, where there is a similarity to us. Number one, we have to understand the special quality of Korban Pesach. There are two types of sacrifices, generally speaking. There's what's called a Korban Tzibur and a Korban Yochid. Korban Tzibur means a sacrifice that the entire congregation brings together in partnership. This is what you say in the Korbanos every day. Every day they used to bring it in the Mikdash, one sheep in the morning, one sheep in the evening, a Korban Melo. This represented the entire Jewish people. For this korban, which actually represented and joined in all Eden, even those who were impure were also automatically joined in, because they didn't do the korban. The kohanim and the Beis Hamikdash did the korban for them, and therefore nobody was excluded from that. Then there is a korban yochid. Korban yochid means a private and individual korban. A person, for some reason, either was obligated in the korban or volunteered he wants to bring a korban. If he had a special occurrence, he wants to bring a korban toida, or a thanks offering, or he transgressed, he made a mistake, and then say korban ephod. So it's called an atonement offering. These are korban yochid. So korban yochid is different than korban tzibur in many ways, obviously. But one obvious thing is that korban yochid does not have a particular time when you have to bring it. Whenever you're ready, you shouldn't delay it unnecessarily. You have a person is chayav in the korban. He has 3 holidays: Pessach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. 3 holidays during which period between 3 holidays and which he can still bring it. He shouldn't delay it at all if he can. But if he delayed it, he has 3 holidays. A chance to bring the korban. But he can choose any time he can bring it. So if he's impure now, he'll wait until he becomes pure and brings the korban. That's korban yochid. Then there is korban Pessach, which is unique amongst all the korbanos. Korban Pessach has the quality of both. It's a korban tzibur and it's a korban yochid. It's a korban tzibur in the sense that everybody participates, and therefore he participates in the same day, not whenever one chooses to. And on the other hand, everyone has to bring his own separately the korban, and therefore somebody who is not clean, he cannot participate, and nobody can include him. He's automatically excluded. What is he excluded from? Not from a korban yochid, from a private korban. He's excluded from a korban tzibur. He's excluded from the community, from the congregation. That's the meaning from korban Pessach. So these people who could not participate in korban tzibur, they came to Moshe and said, how is it possible? Why should we miss out on this opportunity? And then Moshe told him that Hashem gave him this opportunity, this second mitzvah korban Pessach. Which means that this mitzvah, korban Pessach Sheiny, was actually elicited. In other words, it was created by their demand, by their request. Hashem gave them mitzvah because they asked for it. This is really an odd type of thing. Mitzvahs in the Torah, mitzvahs come from Hashem. Mitzvahs are not in response to our request. Clearly, it's explained that this mitzvah was really a mitzvah intended to be given, except Hashem waited until Eden will actually ask for it. But there is another insight, another approach that we can draw from this. Something that we can draw that something that is very, very illuminating for each individual's life. There are 2 basic ways that one can regard his obligation to the Jewish people, his obligation to Hashem, his obligation to the world. One way is that if this is demanded of me, if I'm required to do this, then of course I will do my duty. But this is not something that I'm creating on my own, not something that I'm seeking. It's a burden. On my own, I'm quite prepared to stay in my little cubicle and push my feet up on the table and read the newspaper. But if I have to do it, no, listen, I don't want to be accused that I'm forfeiting my obligation. There's a reverse, a completely different approach to Torah mitzvahs, to service of Hashem, to our joining the Jewish people, and to our obligation to the world, which actually is all one and the same thing. And that is that each individual inherently wants to be included. He is looking for ways to enhance his participation. He is looking for ways not to be an entity unto himself. He's looking for ways to be a participant. What else can I do? Because he recognizes that this is where his real neshama is, where his real truth is. So when these few people were in a situation that they couldn't participate in the Korban Pessach, they could have taken the other path. They could have said, listen, it's by no fault of mine. I'm not to blame for the fact that I couldn't do it. How can I be blamed? I was impure, so I couldn't make the Korban. And on top of it, I was impure because I was doing the right thing. I was supposed to do this. If I didn't do it, that's when I would be accused that I'm remiss in my duties. So what do you want from me? I'm a perfect son. A perfectly righteous person. I have no reproaches. Nobody can accuse me of any wrongdoing. On the contrary, they should praise me for my right doing. That's the path they could have taken. What path did they in fact take? They said, it's irrelevant what was the cause for my missing the sound. I'm not looking for excuses, not looking to be a good person. I'm looking to be a participant in every which way that I can. And if I'm missing out, I do not accept it. This type of approach, this type of recognition, this insight that they exhibited at that moment was enough to elicit a new mitzvah from the neighbors. When Ayid, with all his heart and all his soul, says, I must serve Hashem. I'm not looking for any excuses. I'm not looking to have a pat in the back. Say, oh, you're a good guy. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking to do all that is possible to be done. And if I can't do it, then I'm troubled by it. Whether I'm going to be accused of anything or not is immaterial. Because I want to be a full joiner, a full participant, in full unity with the Jewish people and with Hashem. When this comes from their heart and their soul, then this creates a new mitzvah coming from Hashem. Because this desire expresses such powerful truth that exists in the Jewish soul that it can create a mitzvah. This is not an expression of self-pity, not an expression of less than perfect, something I am missing. This is an expression of the true unity that exists between the Jewish people and Hashem. And when that comes to expression, then nothing can stand in its way. Even if there is a need for a new mitzvah, it can also be done. There is no other example of this type of a thing. Because what is the Korban Pesach? The Korban Pesach was a Korban that Eden brought, was sacrifice performed in Mitzrayim prior to living in Egypt. Why did they do it prior to leaving Egypt? Because this is what precipitated, this is what allowed them to live in Egypt. In other words, it's something which is needed before leaving Egypt. Before it is Mitzrayim, it's not a korban to be brought any other time. It's a korban that belongs in that time. Before you leave Egypt, before it is Mitzrayim, you have to bring a korban Pesach that paves the way for Yetzias Mitzrayim. As is explained, we see this in this one. So where is it? How does it fit all of a sudden in the middle of the second month? Bring a korban, it's out of whack. Doesn't fit. And yet, they got it. And they created a mitzvah out of the blue. Why? Because a Jew, a Yid, when he comes through with his soul, he has the power, the creative power that cannot stop. We here, we're all participants in Pessach Sheiny, as we said before. We're all Pessach Sheiny. Not all of us. I'm excluding none. All even today are in Pessach Sheiny. Because we've had all kinds of trials, and the Jewish people has gone through Kriyas Yamsuf and Yetzias Mitzrayim many, many times over. We're all in Pessach Sheiny. And the principle of Pessach Sheiny, in terms of the Jewish attitude, in terms of where it's embedded in our hearts and soul, is that excuses are for the birds. I'm not looking for excuses. I'm looking to be there where I can be. I'm looking to be in the best place where I can be, regardless of what my background is. And if somebody were pat me in the back and say, don't feel so bad, it's not your fault, look where you're coming from, look what background you're, it doesn't give any condolence. It doesn't make him feel any better. Because that's not the point. The point is not, am I a good person? The point is, where am I? What is my connection with Hashem? What is my connection with the Jewish people? What feeling do I have as a participant, as part of the Jewish people? And if I lack in this, I will do everything, turn the world upside down until I get inside. I don't remember, I may have told you this episode. This is an experience that I witnessed in the early years, in the early days of Hadar HaTorah. Rabbi Lipsky and myself, we started our table going back several decades ago.
Where did you start? Where did you start?
Hadar HaTorah, the yeshiva Hadar HaTorah.
You and Rabbi Lipsky started Hadar HaTorah?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Whenever the cycle of events. So at that time, there was a small group of boys, of students, and we did the best we could. So one student in particular, I remember this episode. He was a young boy, he was almost like 20, 21, young enough to actually pursue a full-fledged goal, not just to get to know a little bit and then follow through in his life's obligations, but he was able, to get really into it. He was of average intelligence. He wasn't one who could really absorb a lot of information and get very deeply into it. He was an average intelligence. But he was very honest and true person. And after a while, in the yeshiva, he felt, because of his background, from the secular background, he felt that I'll never really have a real feel for this the way I should, the way it could. I'll always feel like an outsider. Even though I understand a little bit, I understand this, but I know I'm approaching it from an analytical position. It's not really my own. I really don't feel like I'm into it. Like I feel that this is where I do. This is my thing. This is my food and bread and water. Being a very sensitive boy, this bothered him. And the fact that it was totally beyond his possibility, beyond his fault, it's totally nothing to do with him. He was totally innocent in this situation. On the contrary, he broke away from his background and he came to the issue, which is a sacrifice and all. I mean, everybody knows what kind of sacrifice that is. Nevertheless, he ignored him. What does an excuse do to get me into it? That doesn't do anything for me. He was walking around for months, really troubled by it, and it really bothered him. So one time, he was very preoccupied in this thought, and he took a walk up Eastern Parkway. He walked into botanical gardens. On the edge of the beautiful botanical gardens. In those days, botanical gardens were open for all. There was no charge to enter, so you just walked right in. He walked through botanical gardens, and in some area, he sat down on a bench. And these inner troubles, these inner thoughts, got so deeply into him that he started to cry. And he cried his eyes out, and this place he couldn't get up. After this experience, he came back to Yeshiva, and he said, Rabbi Paltiel, I broke through. I'm here. I'm out of it. And this Bocher, Baruch Hashem, became a young man. He raised a beautiful family. And he's really an insider. I mean, he's got the real feel, the real touch. Like it comes from the gut, from the soul. My point is not Chas v'Shalom to get you all crying. My point is that if we recognize deep down a truth, we should pursue it. We shouldn't say, oh, you'll never get there. It's there. The reason you recognize it is because it's in your soul. And these people, Pessach Sheiny, they cried out to Moshe, even though their arguments and all their pretenses didn't make any sense. You were Tomei, you were impure, what do you want from me? So they said, we were told we couldn't bring the korban, but we're not going to accept that we are therefore outside of the Jewish people. We can't accept that. I have to get right back inside. And Moshe agreed with that. Moshe said, I have no answer for you. Let me see what Hashem said. And Hashem said, I agree with them too. That's the message of Pessach Sheiny. The message of Pessach Sheiny is, we come here to the yeshiva, whatever time, opportunity we have, whatever stage in life, whatever age it is, we have to come into here. For whatever time we have to dedicate, we have to dedicate our whole soul. We do not sit in yeshiva and sit in judgment. What does it look like? Do I agree with this? Do I not agree with this? Does it make sense to me? Doesn't make sense to me. That way we are observing, we are outsiders. And it's like food. Looking at the food and observing it is never going to feed you. It's going to feed you if you put it in your mouth and you chew it up and swallow it. We have to come into this, into whole soul, and say whatever I can absorb, that's what I'm going to absorb. I'm an adult, I'm an intelligent person, I have my discipline that I come with, and I can understand things with that background, That's not gonna help you. That's not gonna help you. You can't understand Torah from a mathematician's perspective. You can't understand Torah from an engineer's perspective. You can't understand Torah from a doctor. Nothing that understand Torah from a Torah perspective. That's the only approach that Torah can be learned. So for the moment that you're here, for the moment that you came to learn Torah, try to get the Torah perspective. Only. So that whatever you learn, whatever you get the soul, the heart, you get its purity, you get its life. And just like medicine, one drop of medicine goes into the veins, goes into the blood, and all of a sudden it cleans you out. It brings health. One drop of pure Torah, not Torah filtered through the eyes of mathematics or engineering, but something that's not filtered, that comes pure Torah. One drop of it allows the neshama to flow through, to come to life. And that's our message from Pessach Sheiny. L'chaim, l'chaim. How many Russian-speaking guys we have here?
You're not free to speak in Russian if you want.
Кто? How many Russians? How many Russian people who know that? Huh? Come on, put your hands.
Yes.
One.
Russian speaking.
Что?
Нет. Ничего.
Ничего. You?
Told me to raise my hand. It's not Russian, it counts. 6 people.
6 people count. Okay. There is a famous song, everybody knows it. Net, net, nikavo. I'm sure everybody knows it. But this song is sung from that point. Net, net, nikavo. But there are a couple of stanzas before that. I'm sorry. Yes. No. No, I can't. Well, you know what to ask him. No good, no? So? Oh. Yeah, sure, of course. Yeah, sure. Okay. I'm sorry, gentlemen. Okay. So this nigun, net nikava, has a whole part before it that usually is not sung. I don't know how many people know it. The original Russian is not. So I want to teach you that song and teach you the words and explain to you what's the origin, what it signifies. How did this song altogether develop? Even the Russians who are sitting around this table, even those who actually were Russian and came out of there, don't begin to imagine, understand what it was like. So therefore, we're going to sing this song. I'm going to explain to you, and you will readily see what it represents. By the way, as far as these carrots is concerned, as you can hay, but if they're wet, you have to dry them before you eat them. Okay. The words of the song are Nibayusa Nikavo, I fear no one, Iniveri Nikamu, and I trust no one, I believe no one, Tolka Boga Navo, except God alone. And then comes the famous thing, no, I don't believe anybody, nobody exists except God alone. And you can understand under the circumstances that this was composed and sung in response to all the oppression and all the pressure that prevailed in that time. So this actually was an expression of enormous personal insight, because without that we couldn't sing this song in those circumstances. This was really a personal expression. It wasn't just a nice song, a nice little poem. It was something that sprung from the power of the soul, the same power of the soul that, in different circumstances, that precipitated as a Sheiny. The same power of the soul that says that in no circumstances do I accept anything but the truth. And excuses don't work for me. Excuses don't work for me. Excuses only say, oh, well, you're born in Egypt, so you stay there. And I'm not accepting that. Not accepting that. I'm going to do everything to get out of there. That's what this song is saying. This is why I felt you should learn the song on Pessach Sheiny. Okay? Since we are all very musical over here, so in no time we're going to pick it up and sing it. The song goes like this. Nibayusa nikavo, iniveru nikamu, tolka boga odnamu. Nibayusa Yusani Kavo Ini Veruni Kamu Tol Kavo Gadnamu Net Nikavo Tol Gadnavo Net Nikavo Very good, great.
What? No, he's the guy.
In line and in similar fashion that we discussed before, we spoke about the demand and not taking excuses and so forth. But very importantly, neither should be accept any kind of discouragement. I can't. It doesn't stick. I'm learning. It doesn't sink in. You can imagine. You know, wood is in the plant world, in the plant world level, which has an aspect of life, right? It grows and it has a quality of life. When you cut the tree from its roots, then it becomes a doimen. Doimen means inanimate. It no longer grows. It no longer has even that bit of life quality that it had before. It no longer has it. So now it is just a piece of wood, not a tree. Piece of wood. Still, it's wood, and therefore it has certain fine qualities. It can absorb things. It absorbs water. It has a certain softness to it. You can tell that this is not a piece of rock. It is not a piece of steel. This is a piece of wood that came from a tree that at some point in time was a growth, was a plant, had life in it. Then you take this wood and you put it through a process. There are all kinds of different processes that are, especially nowadays, that are possible. Where they can take wood and subject it to enormous pressure that squeezes out of the wood any of the what's called the space between molecules, squeezes out everything, all bits of air in it, and it becomes a real hard, it's like a stone. So at that point, it still originated from wood, but there is hardly any cognizance, any vestige of it being wood, of having some kind of chayas, some kind of a life in it. It becomes like a stone, like a rock. And at that point, you can soak it in water. It doesn't get affected by the elements, or change of atmosphere, nothing, like a rock. In order to revive this wood, there has to be a reverse process to get this wood somehow revived, that it should open up and allow something that it should be able to absorb air, absorb relate to its external, to its outside environment. Which illustrates that in the physical world it is possible through a process to have such an effect that that the living thing should lose its living quality. It still has an origin, it still relates to it. You can relate to it. You say this is wood and this is wood, but it actually kind of loses its quality of absorption, its quality of chayas, of life. There are people, if yes, a carpenter says he likes to work with wood, but he doesn't like to work with this hard wood, because it's not wood. It's like working with a piece of rock. It doesn't feel comfortable, doesn't feel that he's been working with something that's pliable, something that lends itself to your human touch. You don't feel it. But we see that such a process exists, and it's possible to drain a living thing of its sense of life. So in the case of the wood, I don't know if there is a way to reverse the process. After all, this wood was, at that point, is no longer living, no longer attached to the earth, no longer growing, has a quality of growth. And therefore it has no chayas, and it can be permanently changed. But we have to understand what this signifies. It is possible to have a living human being with a living soul, with a living mind, but if he is subjected to a secular or worldly view of things, it dries him up. It dries up the soul. And that which normally the human mind and heart absorbs, feels and breathes, he becomes that which is insensitive to it. And this is one of the reasons that sometimes we find it difficult. It doesn't enter, I become not porous. Porous means an object that absorbs water. like a piece of plastic. Plastic is not porous. Doesn't get affected by external elements. Because everything I take in with a degree with a filter. I don't take in what I'm learning directly. I filter it through the means that I was taught to filter. The external means, and therefore nothing really touches me. And God forbid, one can learn and learn and learn. Torah is like water. The water has to be absorbed. And if you can't absorb it, the water runs down and it just runs off. And, it's it's very frustrating. It just doesn't hit me. I'm not feeling it. But we have to know that as long as we are alive, and the Neshama really is there, we have to be stubborn and never give up. And eventually it'll break through. It'll break through. And in this sense, from this perspective, you understand to what degree and how significant it is. If you learn a whole day, if you learn a whole week, you learn a whole month, and you struggled and you struggled and you struggled, and then you understood one thing in Torah. Say, I'll answer to this one thing. You don't understand what that means. It means that after all your struggle, you're starting to open up. You're able to absorb something. This one thing is the precursor for much more. It's like a sign of life. The sign of, there is a mind, there is a soul, there is a heart. And I'm able to understand Torah concepts. We don't accept discouragement. And as hard as we work, nothing is ever lost. Nothing is lost. Eventually, everything, when the mind opens up, everything starts to make sense. And everything becomes absorbed internally. Nothing is ever lost. The hard work is instrumental in refining our minds, in refining our hearts, and allowing them to open, allow them to become porous. I don't know how many of you are familiar with biological processes, but I want to explain to you what happens when a person eats. What happened to my cookies over here? All right. No, that's not from me. They're mine? Yeah, my cracker. What happens when you eat something? Right? This is a cookie. It's made of flour that grew on the earth. It's not, it's not made of flesh. It's not made of blood. It's not made of what I am. What happens when I eat it? I eat it, I chew it up, I swallow it. And thank God that Hashem, I have the means of digestive system, and it digests it, and whatever happens, and then it throws it out. What's the value of it? Just because it passes through my system, that's what it is. The eating is not a means of filling your stomach and feel that I'm not hungry. That's not the point of eating. There's something much more significant, much more refined. So what actually happens is that when you chew up the food, the chewing up the food is not just to break it up into little pieces. Chewing up the food is that the food actually gets mixed with all kinds of fluids, body fluids, until it actually disintegrates and it goes through a chemical change. And after many chemical changes, many filters, some aspect of this food becomes so refined and so pure that it no longer goes through. Normally, you put food, it goes through a pipe. The body has certain pipes that direct where the food should go. It becomes so refined that the pipe no longer can hold it in, because it loses its quality of being a separate entity. That which remains a separate entity is actually washed out from the body. What's retained in the body is a certain aspect, certain part of it that becomes so refined that it actually seeps through the membrane, the internal membranes, and it goes right into the bloodstream, because it seeps through the walls of the veins, and that which seeps through, this is what actually gives us real high. This is what's valuable in the food. The part of the food that fills up our stomach is a waste. It just tires out our stomach. But that part which becomes absorbed, that's the real food. That's what really gives us sustenance. When you learn Torah, there's a similar process. We learn, we absorb information, we retain information, we lose information. But there is a certain understanding, level of understanding, certain refinement, what we call a sense, a catch. Oh, I get the point. This, I get the point. I get the flash. This is so fine that it gets absorbed through the brain. In other words, it goes beyond the filter. It's not just understood through our means of understanding. It becomes part of us. That becomes a reality. That becomes that which we really relate to personally. And that becomes our highest. And this ultimately refines and clears out the courses of our mind and of our brain, and allows us, opens it up, allows us to be porous, to be absorbent, so that when we hear a fine thought, a Torah thought, it finds its place. It cleaves. It sticks right in, because it gets absorbed. And thus, the Torah becomes that life force, that food that feeds our neshama. It seems to us, we learn, okay, so I know another Mishnah, and I know a little bit in information in Mishnah. That's only as long as it didn't go through the membrane. When we allow it, and we allow it to continue to refine us until things go through our membrane of the brain, when we really feel for it and really sense its reality and truth, that's when it becomes a life force. That's when we begin to live from Torah. So, with Hashem's help, and with your dedicated effort and your dedication to, as I said, complete in submersion in the Torah that you're learning, at least while you're here, something will be absorbed. And that little something, like I said, from all the food, we eat a big meal, from all the food, just a little trifle really becomes the real food. And that real trifle is what keeps you alive. That little trifle that is retained and absorbed in your brain, that becomes the highest of your neshama. And as a result of that, you can go out in the world and you see the world somewhat differently than you saw before. There's something else. It's not just some kind of a chemical combination of a political or mathematics or whatever it is. It's something else. There is life in the world. And with this sense of life in the world, you can build your life in the Hashem. You can live in this world and not get lost. So I have to end. I want to say l'chaim to you. Should be hatzlocha. And always remember, Pessach Sheiny for us is every day. Because the message of every mitzvah is all the time. And the koyach that we get from Pessach Sheiny, we carry it us throughout the whole year. Every day is Pessach Sheiny. Yesterday does not decide what's going to happen today. Yesterday I may have been in Mitzrayim, or being impure, and today I have another chance. Pessach Sheiny. And I'm not going to give it up. I'm not going to allow the Satan to tell me, oh, but yesterday you were impure, why are you coming now? I'm going to answer him, I have a neshama. And the neshama is still there, and it was there yesterday. Yes, it was impure yesterday, but today I'm going to make it. And if I'm not going to make it today, I'm going to make it tomorrow. Ultimately, I will make it. And that's how we push through until we transform, we change the dry wood to living wood, and the living wood to living flesh, and living flesh to a living neshama. L'chaim, l'chaim, l'chaim.